Historical Commission. We also have members of the Germantown Historical Preservation Association. You raise your hands. We got two here, Mary and Edna. We also have our alderman here, and she is our relationship to that commission. Okay. All right, Miss Sherry Hicks. And what we're going to do today is that we've got an excellent program because you're going to be able to hear from the man who restored this church here. And what we're going to do is let him speak. This is going to be on camera, and we're going to convert it to a YouTube so we can put it on our website that's coming soon. Okay, so what we're going to do is that he will speak, and then we'll have a time for question and answer. But if you ever listen to one of these and the man's up there, you hear some mutter in the background, then he answers a question, you don't know what the question was, I'm going to ask the question again for the camera, and then he'll respond to it from that. So we'll take that kind of order to you, okay? Okay, all right, you tell me when you're ready, Joe. This is Joe Burns.
I'm ready.
Joe's with the Tennessee Geological Society, and he does great film work. Catherine, she's with the Tennessee Geological Society, and you get to know her. She does great research. And so, okay. We're glad to have some souls back that have been away from us for a while. We've got Andy Ross back here. He's the executive director of the Davies Manor Plantation. And we have people from the Lynching Sites Projects, John Ashworth and Margaret. And Margaret's at the University of Memphis, right? Retired from, okay. All right, Joe, you tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Oh, you're ready? Okay.
Yeah.
We can just think.
By the way, Andy, my second great uncle preached here in 1857.
That's right.
Jeremiah Burns.
Your great
second
great grandfather was a minister here with this Baptist chapel back in the 1800s.
1857.
1850s. Okay. All right. This is May 13th, 2021. I'm Andy Pouncey. I'm chairman of the Shelby County Historical Commission. And today our speaker is a former mayor of Germantown, Charles Salvaggio. Charles came here in the 80s. He was in his 30s. And in 1986, and going back into 1986, he was elected as an alderman. And then he was elected 2 years into another mayor's term to become mayor. So he essentially served 1.5 terms. He, like that mayor, were in their 30s and taken on a huge responsibility. Immediately he found that he needed to hire a city administrator, an assistant, a city clerk, you name it. All this was put upon him in his first months. So he held a lot of responsibility. He also is largely responsible for the Germantown Performing Arts Center that many of you may have gone to, and also helped to start the foundation for the Germantown Community Library here. Okay. So thank you for all that, Charles. I came to work in '90 when Charles, I was a young kid. I was in my 30s too. I remember those days. So, well, anyway, we were blessed that Charles, not only being a past mayor, but became the general contractor for this project to restore this chapel, which is the tune of almost like $1.4 million. It was huge. And actually, the Germantown Historical Preservation Association did a lot to help raise funds. Jackie Clifton and other members of that were very helpful with that. So anyway, without further ado, Charles, thank you.
Very honored to be here today to talk about a project that means so much to me and I think means a lot to our community. And I'd like to give you just a couple of seconds of background of who I am and what I do, and that will make sense more after I go through what we did with the church to renovate it. But I grew up in South Memphis. My dad was a general contractor. He was excavating and grading and demolition contractor. We cleared lots for buildings, built parking lots, and I say we, I was about 6 years old back then, and I started working with him as the time I could get in the truck until the time he passed away when I was 17. But he was also a demolition contractor, so we tore down a lot of buildings in the urban renewal project in the mid-60s in Memphis. Tore down a lot of houses, a lot of structures, not large buildings. We're not a big general contractor, we're smaller contractors. Did quite a few houses on the Interstate 240 corridor, Bellevue and Peach, Vance, all those areas over there. We tore down hundreds of houses over there and buildings. And growing up as a kid in the construction business and having a real bulldozer and a real dump truck instead of the toy dump truck and the toy bulldozer in your backyard was a real pleasure for me. And I loved every second of it. I spent every day when I got out of school, during the summer, I spent all those days out in the construction field with my dad. So what I did learn more than anything was how to take a building apart where it didn't collapse on you, how to salvage material, not necessarily how to build it back, but how it comes apart. So you know if you know how something is assembled and comes apart, you can pretty well do a pretty good job putting it back together. So ironically, I learned that in my earlier days, and I always felt weird about these buildings and these houses because we would find personal things in these houses, especially the 240 corridor. There'd be furniture in the houses, there'd be things in the attic, pictures, and we go through all this stuff. Like, well, people lived here. It wasn't just a house. This was a home for somebody. And that always kind of touched me. So I've always had a soft spot for history and buildings. And even though we destroyed more buildings than we should have probably, but we did because they had to be done at that time, I always had in mind I'd like to build. So when my dad passed away, I went to work, got out of school, went to work, and I started a small construction company called Memphis Door and Hardware. I actually started laying carpet at first, and these guys would come in and cut the doors off after they installed the carpet. And I thought, well, this is a pretty good deal. I'm not down on hands and knees crawling and putting carpet down and moving furniture, so I started cutting doors for carpeting. And I built that business over the years, and that started in 1972. In 1976, we converted to Memphis Door and Hardware. We started building doors and selling doors and installing doors and hardwares and locks and all those sorts of things. And in 1994, I had so many customers for the door company who wanted me to add on their kitchen or add on their house or build a new house. I decided to start building. So that's how I got in the building and construction business. But my knowledge has always been in old construction. I've always loved that sort of thing. So let's fast forward to Germantown, and this is in 2000, probably 13, if I remember right. Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these dates. 2013, 2014. At that time, the city of Germantown was going to widen the road out here. Big controversial road project out here. And they had like 4 different plans. Some of them were going to take out the road all the way to the steps of the church. Some were going to go on the other side, take the shopping center out. Very controversial. At that time, there was discussion. The hospital, the church had moved from here. They moved out east. And they got a beautiful new home out there. So the church just sitting here and kind of dilapidated. And when they sold this property, they sold it to the hospital. It's part of the hospital project. Well, the hospital was not in the historic renovation business or the church business, so they could care less about this building, and rightfully so, not being critical of them at all. But they had no use for this building. They actually used it as a construction office while they built the hospital. And so they came in here, what was left of the church, they pretty much destroyed during the construction phases. They nailed stuff all over the floors, built partitions where you're sitting now, and had these kiosks and offices in here. And the back part of the building was added on in 1922. There was classrooms there for Germantown Baptist Church. They were using that kind of subsequently back there for storage and things, but it was really a mess. They vacated this property, and at that time it was in pretty bad condition. At that time, the attic was full of all kinds of animals, birds, raccoons, squirrels, you name it, they were living up there. The property was really bad. The roof was leaking. The floors were bad in here. It was actually dangerous to even come in here. The ceiling tiles were falling out. It was really a sight. I got contacted by Jackie Cliff and Carolyn Gates, and they wanted to build a museum in Germantown. And after a couple of meetings, we sat and talked and thought, boy, this would be a great place for a museum for the city of Germantown. How great would it be to renovate this building and put a museum here? Great use of the building and all that. So we started kind of looking at cost and everything, and we knew it was going to be well over $1 million to renovate the building. We went into some discussion with the city back and forth. The city was kind of hot and cold on doing it or not doing it. Finally, they decided they did not want to do it. I happened to be on the board of directors of the church, or the hospital, for many years, so I knew most of the people over there. So I told Jackie and Carolyn that I would talk to the hospital and see if there's some chance they might participate in the project to renovate the building and do it as a museum or whatever they want to do with it, rather than lose the building. We even talked about jacking the building up and moving it down the street because we didn't want to lose it. At that time, the Employees Park was coming into renovation. Think about moving it down there. We got a price to do that. That kind of didn't work out. It's not what we really wanted to do, but we wanted to save the building. So fast forward again, we kept the pressure on the hospital, and about the time that they were ready to make a decision, ironically, there's a church on Cooper and Union. I don't remember the name of the church, Andy, but they tore it down. Yeah. Big stink in the city, and all you historic people I know remember. I can't remember the name of the church. But couldn't have been better timing for us. We seized that opportunity. I went and met with the administrator and said, look, these guys are getting a black eye down there. Y'all don't want to do this. Why don't we try to put a program together? I'll consult and we'll charge it down, figure out what it's going to cost to build the building back and get it like it needs to be, come up with a budget. Maybe we can raise some money in the community to save the building. So that's kind of how it all started. We came up and I spent pretty much a whole summer over here, under the building, on top of the building, all around it, wrote up a report on the building, gave it to the hospital, told us it's going to be about $1,400,000 to redo the church. Of course, they passed out on the floor, flopped around a little bit, but they got over it. Jackie and I and Carol and a bunch of people got together, and we said, well, maybe if we come up with some money, they'll do the project, they participate in it. Well, we had a get-together and a fundraiser, and I'm sorry, I'm on an insulin pump. I can't turn it off either, so hopefully it'll stop here. So we had a fundraiser, raised about $70,000, generated a tremendous amount of interest in the community about it. So we kind of got a little momentum going. Went back to talk to the hospital, talked to a few other people. Nancy and Ed Barnett stepped up, and they contributed $700,000 to the project. A couple other people contributed $75,000, $25,000. Multiple people, their names are on this plaque over here. You'll see that when you get up. So we got a little bit of money together. The hospital said, well, we don't want to start the project until we get all the money. Well, the building is collapsing literally. It's starting to fall apart. And as you know, if you have a home or a building or anything that you don't maintain, you know that that is a rapid death. I mean, it goes fast. If you got a roof leak, it creates some other problems. That's what was happening here. So finally, we kept on meeting and talking back and forth in the hospital. Said, well, hey, how about y'all front the money to do the project, do it in 2 phases. If we can get the building stabilized, get the exterior finished out, do the work where the building would be safe and not come apart and incur any more damage that it already has, then at least we got that stopped, and then we can raise the money to finish the building out. And they stepped up to the plate and they said, yeah, we'll do it. And so since I had done all the legwork on it, and we have an extensive background in historic renovation, we've renovated buildings at the Cairo Square. We did the Hewlett Dunn building, the Stamps House. We have probably the best resume any contractor in town that does historic renovation. So they said, we'd have to hire a consultant. You've already done that. We'd just rather you do it as a private project. We're going to pay for it. We'd rather you do the project. So we ended up doing the project ourselves. So what we were challenged with when we started this project was a building that was literally about to fall in. I mean, it was in really, really bad shape. The roof was sagging. If you sat on the south side of the building and looked north at the top edge of the building, you got this end of the building, this end of the building. There was almost a foot swag in the roof from point to point. It had collapsed. So what it had done, it had buried it this way. It went down and pushed the walls out. So we had to come in, and the floor where you're sitting in the middle of the building had dropped an equal amount in the center of the building. It had a big swag in there. When you walked in there, you're running downhill through here. Really bad. The building was built in the early 1870s. It was mortise and tenon construction, which means they didn't use nails hardly. All the lumber in this building, the superstructure of the building, was timbers that were milled right here on site. How do we know that? The timbers were hand-hewn. You can look at them and tell. They had axe marks in them. They had been hand-hewn. The bark had been stripped off of them. Used timbers. All the timbers were native trees around here. Red gums, oaks, ashes, hickory. That was the wood that was used to put the church together. There's beams that are 60 foot long in one piece around the perimeter of the building. This side and this side, 60-foot beams. One solid piece that was put in. And all that stuff was put together with mortise and tenon. So what they do is they take a piece of lumber, they notch it, they make another piece corresponding to that notch, slide it in there, they drill a hole in there, and they drive a wood peg in there. That's how the building was held together. It worked really well for 100 years, but the moisture and the rot and stuff ate out those pins that were holding the building together. That's why it's separated so bad. So we had to come in here and shore the building up. One other thing we had to do too was in the process of and I got a little ahead of myself here, in the process of getting the building to where the hospital wanted to do it was they wanted a maintenance-free building. They wanted a building that was up to code and standards, which means it has to be handicap accessible, has to have bathrooms. That was not here originally. So we had to that's one of the things that really ran the cost of the building up. We also commissioned an architect, Michael Walker, to design this part of the building. This wall right here, from here is all the church was. Behind that was a brick structure where the old school was. We tore that down, and then we built the bathrooms on the back, but we built it to correspond with the building, where if you look at the building now, you would never know that was added on. You would think that was all the same building. So that was part of the high cost of the building. So the first thing we had to do when we come in here is shore the building up, get it safe we come in here to work. So we came in and put cross braces in. We put chains and hooks over here, and over here we made cables, and we pulled the building back together and got it in check. Ironically, the building was really level. It was only a ½ inch out of square from here to that corner over there. Amazing. I build new buildings. That's pretty impressive. To be building out here strings and ropes and stuff that they did when they built this. So that part of the building was good, but we had to draw the walls back together. So we came in and we secured the walls this way. We went under the building. We spent a month under the building, jacking the building up. Because the timbers in here go from that wall to that wall, and from that wall to that wall, the main structural timbers go through there. They're tied together on the center beam. In some of the renovations, when they tried to rebuild the church, or not try to rebuild it, but tried to make it safe, some guys went over there that didn't know what they were doing and jacked the building up and made a big mess. So we had to go in there and take all that out, and we had to jack the building up a little bit at a time and let it settle as we jacked it, and repin the sides, pull it all back together. That took a month to do that. And that was probably the most sleepless nights I ever had in my life, because I was worried the building was going to fall apart, but we got through it. Then once we got the floor straight, we came in and we beamed up through the ceiling, and we raised the ridge of the building in the center. And that pulled the top of the walls back in check. It got everything back where it needed to be. So after we passed that point, there is a new beam that runs and sits on that wall and sits on this wall that we had to bring in with the crane, cut the back of the building out, slide that beam through here, and then retile the structure back together. The steeple on the church was a real challenge. Tall structure is about 60 feet tall. It's very intricate the way it was designed and put together, all that stuff with no nails and everything, but when we were up there working, a storm would come through, you could feel it going back and forth. I was up there many a days and thought, this is going to be it, it's not going to happen, but we got through it. So what we did, we strapped the building with seismic straps all the way through. That was part of the engineering that we had to do in the building to get it safe again. So there are metal straps that go from the bottom of the building to the top cornice, to the top eave, and all the way through the top of the bell tower. There's, I think there was 20-something thousand screws that we used to put all that stuff together. Straps are 65 feet long, and they're seismic rated, so we had to strap everything in the building. We tried to keep the character of the building exactly what it was. We didn't throw away anything we didn't have to. We did have to throw the windows away. They were just absolutely gone. The windows were gone. The doors, we saved the doors on the front, rebuilt those. The interior doors were original doors. This floor is the original floor. This is heart pine, river pine. It's beautiful wood. This had linoleum, nails, carpet, and about 3 inches of glue on it. It was the biggest mess you've ever seen. But you can see that turned out absolutely beautiful. Nobody believed that we could salvage these floors. Where this gentleman is sitting right here, there was a potbelly stove right here, and one over here where this gentleman is sitting. That's how they heated the stove in 1870. They come in at 3 o'clock in the morning, put some coal in the potbelly stove, heat it up, warm it up for the service for that day, and that's how they heated the church. In the summer, they cooled the church by dropping those top windows there and letting the heat out of the building. That's how they circulate the heat out of the building. That's why they have 3-tier windows in here. So what we did, we tried to salvage everything we could. We salvaged the floors. We did not take the floors up. We worked with the floors we had here. We did add some wood in that was rotted. We added some wood in that we couldn't save. But about 99% of this floor is the original floor. All the ceiling is original ceiling. We did take some of the planks out when we had to do the jacking and the piering and everything. Took some of the pieces out, but we saved them and reclaimed them and put them back up there. So the lumber you see on the ceiling and the lumber you see here, and all the structural lumber that holds the building together is all the original lumber that was in the church from the day it was built. The windows came out of Marvin up in Wisconsin. They built the windows. We chose them to build them because they had the most experience. They also had the highest energy efficiency rating of any window company at that time that designed and built this particular window. And they could build them to the specifications that we asked. Even though these windows are not operable, they look operable because that's exactly how the window looked when we took the building over. We did change the panes of the glass. There were 4 panes of glass instead of 9 panes in here, and we changed that for energy efficiency, and probably the original church had the 9 panes, so that's what we went back with what we did on those. All the millwork in here, the millwork being this trim, the baseboards, the banner boards, the window trim, the crown molding up there is all exact replicas of what we took out that we could salvage. We took those out, we took them over to a lumber yard, mill shop that made the knives to form and cut those pieces of trim exactly like what was in the church. So those are not original, but they're exactly what was in here when we took it down. The building had this siding on it. This is a beaded, what they call a bead board or beaded ceiling, 4-inch. The material that was in here was a 1/4 inch thick. The material we put back is 3/4 inches thick because it gives more structural stability. The building outside had lap siding, and we replicated the lap siding exactly the same as what came off the building. This was another challenge when we built the building because it's not built like we build buildings now. Didn't have any kind of bracing in it. So the bracing in this building, when they built it in the 1870s, they put the siding around the building on the studs on the walls. They came in and put the bead board, and that makes it strong. If you look at a piece of cardboard box and you peel off that one layer, you got that little ripple in there. Well, if you know you peel it off, it gets weaker, and then you pull the ripple out, it's just a piece of paper. This is the exact same principle of construction with this. So as we took the siding off, we had to put an OSB board in its place to stabilize the building and then come back and put our siding over that. And it was a real tedious thing because you could only take off small sections at a time. And the guys, if you know anything about carpentry, there's trim carpenters, there's framing carpenters, there's master carpenters. I'm a master carpenter, master trim carpenter. The guys that do the OSB board on the side, they're just framing carpenters, they're real carpenters. So they come in and rip the siding off the building. We had to wrap every piece of siding that came off the building in plastic bags and haul it to a secure landfill because they had lead paint on it. And we had an air station set up all around the building. They monitor the air quality. Every 6 hours, they come and monitor how much lead was in the air as we took it apart. It was a real big nightmare on that part. And so the cost really went up because we had to put that OSB on there, and then we had to take it back off where they could put the siding on the building, where the finished carpenters come in and put the siding on. We had the siding milled. We back primed the siding where it would hold up, and this building is now, that renovation was done in 2015. It still hasn't been painted since 2015, so I'm pretty proud of that it held up as well as it's holding up. But that was part of that low maintenance to get the hospital to buy into the project because they did not want a building that had to paint every 2 or 3 years. So the Marvin windows, the extra attention that we had to siding and details of waterproofing the outside and bringing the building up to standards is one of the reasons they were willing to take that leap of faith and get this done for us. As the building went together, we did it in 2 phases. We did the exterior of the building, which was approximately $750,000 the first phase of the project. What that did was get the building secure. We were able to stabilize the building, finish all of the exterior of the building out, paint all of the building, put the infrastructure in, infrastructure being the fire system. It had to have a sprinkler system put in, very expensive. We had to run a fire main from Germantown Germantown Road out here up to the site in that closet that's fire risers. So Joe could tell you all about that being the fireman. We had to put the sprinkler in. If you look at the ceiling, you see these little white medallions up there. That's the sprinkler heads. If the building catches on fire, they pop down, the water comes out, puts the fire out. And we had those specially designed because we didn't want the old sprinkler heads that stick out that you can see look real unsightly. So we had those put in and built for that. All the wiring was done, the sprinkler system. The building was finished on the exterior to look like it was a totally finished building. And then phase 2 followed the next year because everybody got real excited about the building, how great it looked. They wanted to finish it out. The second phase of the project was a little over $500,000 to finish that out. In addition to that, you had architectural fees and permits and insurance and all the stuff that goes in any construction project. and we finished the interior out. So when we came in to finish the interior out, we took the beadboard off the inside of the building, had this beadboard made, its exact size, it's only thicker to meet the structural stability that we needed in the engineering report that we did. And that's the only change. But this building looks virtually like it looked in 1871 when it was built. This is pretty much what the building looked like, less the lights, less those two vents up there with the heating and air system. We put all the mechanical systems come through the floor. They don't come through the walls. If you look around, you see registers everywhere. We ducted everything under the building. We were trying to get it as close to look like it did when it was built. We didn't want air conditioning vents and stuff all over the building. We actually had these I actually made those myself, those two vents, to look, you know, natural with the building, not a metal vent or a louver that looked kind of out of date. The bathrooms we did period time around the 1812, 1810s. If you look at the tile and the motif in there, it matches that pretty much, that standard of what would have been in the building. If it had been built about the time it was built, 1870 to 1910, that's pretty much the era of everything they used back then. There were a lot of challenges here. The ground here, incredibly wet. I mean, I don't know how many pieces of equipment we got stuck out in the yard. I don't know what's going on, but it was so wet here. Every day we come to work, we spend half day pulling the equipment out because it gets stuck. You pull around the building, it just sinks. Things that we found that I thought were really interesting that I want to talk a little bit about. Andy and I talked a lot about this. There's a lot of discussion back and forth, not controversy, just talk that what happened to the building that was built in 1941? Was it burnt during the Civil War? Did they take it and use it somewhere else? They take it apart and disassemble it. There's two theories that the Union Army needed the material, so they took the building apart and they shipped it somewhere else and used the material somewhere else during the Civil War. The real romantic story is that when they took over the city of Germantown, the Union general and the Confederate general was here, and they decided to burn the whole city down except for the Presbyterian church because that was the faith that they were, and they needed a field hospital. So they didn't burn that church down, but they burned this down with everything else. And word has it that the pastor lived across the street. He sent somebody out here to get the Bible out of the church, and as they were lighting torches to the church, it went up and burnt. Then the other story is they reclaimed the material. We found in our research that we did when we took the building apart that there was definitely some fire here at some point. Now, could have been a fire. They might have left part of the foundation up. Could have been a cold day. The Union Army camped out here protecting the railroad from the Confederates. They could have built fires behind that footing, keep the wind off of it, and that's what burnt those footings. But those footings have some fire on them. They're burnt. I mean, there's no question about that. Matter of fact, we even found remnants of cinders and things under the building. I never found any burnt timbers in the building. So they either burnt the whole building down or they hauled all the timbers out here and used them somewhere else. We didn't find any burnt timbers anywhere in the building. So the theory of whether it was burnt or not, I guess, will remain a mystery. There seems to be a pretty strong story on both sides of that, but I do know there was definitely some fire under this foundation at some point. It was pretty hot because this building was built with what they call salmon brick. It's a real soft pink brick almost. It's almost like chalk. You can actually break it and it's brittle. And when it gets hot, it turns almost a yellow color, and that's what it was on the front, especially on that side of the building, very, very yellow. And a lot of the original piers were in the building too, and they look like they had some fire to them too. So I guess that will remain a mystery forever. We'll figure it out. But Andy, being the stickler he is on the history, he's going to figure it out and get the right story. I know that. But it was a real interesting project. We finally got everything redone in 2016. We came in and finished out the interior. That took almost a year to finish out. Everything in here, as I said, is as close to the original as we could get. The lights weren't in here, obviously, when the building was in 1870, but Graham's actually commissioned these lights. They did some research. This would have been the light they would have put in. It had been a gas lamp, most likely, but this is the style it would have been if they put them in. We did bring some high-tech features to the building. We got a projector behind here, a screen behind here. We got a sound system in here. One of the ways we sold this in the hospital was that there's not any small chapel venues in Germantown that you could do a wedding in or a special ceremony, a funeral or something like that. So they do use this quite a bit for that. They get quite a few requests to use it. I don't think they charge anybody to do it, but I think it's great that they stepped up to the plate and did what they did. One other thing too, the pews in here are not original. The pews came out of a church downtown. They're circa 1920s, as best we could tell. We do have one original pew that's in storage right now, and it's a shaker style pew, and it's got a very straight back, a very flat seat, very simple shaker style construction. It's not radius or anything like that. It's got quite a few carvings of board kids that were during the baptism service that was going on here apparently, because they carved the names in the seat or whatever. But we've got that at the hospital that it's in storage right now. The bell, I didn't tell you all about the bell. The bell supposedly was commissioned by the same company that built the Liberty Bell. Obviously after the Liberty Bell was cast, but it was cast in the same factory that the Liberty Bell was cast in. The bell is operable. It wasn't working. I got up there and restrung it. You can actually ring it now. It's quite the piece. It's I bet the thing weighs 500 pounds. It's really heavy. It's thick, cast iron, and brass. It's absolutely gorgeous. I wish I could take y'all up in the steeple and show y'all the work up there, because the construction of this is really amazing. I mean, to see the construction those guys did, being a contractor and a builder myself and a carpenter, the work those guys did was absolutely phenomenal. To be able to join a piece of wood together that tight and that accurate with an axe and a hammer, very impressive. I wish my guys could do that in the field with all this laser technology we have now, and it just doesn't happen. But that's pretty much it as far as the renovation of the church goes, and what we did and how we did it. And Andy, you want to open up questions?
Yeah. I'll start with the first question. There's a ball on top.
Yes.
You talked about. You want to tell about that ball?
I did. I'm glad you brought that up. When we had to rent a lift to get up to paint the steeple, and there's a ball up there, and it looks like about this big from the ground here. Well, it's actually about this big, and it's got bullet holes in it. And the interesting thing is, in the 50 caliber bullet holes, they're the right size, and that's pretty much what they used during the Civil War. So I'm thinking that finial that's on top there might have been the original finial that was on the original church when it was built before it was burned or discarded. There are bullet holes through that finial, and there are bullet holes from the ground, but there's also bullet holes from somebody shooting it from down low. So you know the trajectory, it had to be sitting on the ground for them to shoot it. So that ball was either on the ground during construction when this portion was built, or it was on the ground and somebody using the target practice. But there's 7 or 8 holes in it. That's really, the painters were up there, I was down here and they came down and said, hey, you gotta come up here and see this. They took a picture of it. So I went up in the cherry thing and looked at it. It was really pretty crazy. So that's also proof that maybe, obviously that was metal when it burned. So, but it did not have any scorch marks on it because we had it down at one point. It was not burned. But it could have been here either during that construction phase or after, so we're not sure on that.
And you began the restoration in 15 and you finished in 16?
16, yeah. We started in the beginning of 2015. The first phase took a year, and then the second phase took about another year to finish it out. And the second phase was pretty tedious because of the millwork that we had to get and all that. It took a while to get everything made. And we sent a lot of millwork back because it didn't meet our standards of what we wanted, and it wasn't exact, and it was quite a passion to get it done. Also the shutters on the church are the identical shutters that were here when the church was built. Some of those were still here, so we replicated those exactly, so they did look exactly like the originals did.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I got it.
Yes.
Did the church have an organ?
The question is, did the church have an organ?
It had a organ in here, and there was if you look at this line right here, we didn't sing this out purposely. This was added in at some point, and this was the choir area where they set up here. The choir apparently sat here, and the organ sat here. But it was not the organ that was here when we did the work was not a very old organ at all. It looked like about 1950s. It was a pneumatic organ. It did have air, but it wasn't the kind you pump up to work. But I'm trying to remember what we did with that organ, Jackie? I think the hospital might still have it. I'm not sure of that. I don't remember. I'm glad you brought that up. I need to look that up.
Andy's got an organ for you.
Hey, yeah.
It's 19th century. Okay. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah, Mary.
First of all, thanks for doing this. It's amazing that this is insane. Thank you for that. And secondly, when you were in the attic or underneath, did you find anything from the school
We did find a few things. We found quite a few Civil War bullets. 50 caliber, both spent and unspent, shot or unshot. We found those actually out here at the handicap ramp when we dug this up and reported. They were out there. Sid Witherington came out here and took his, whatever you call it, the thing that...
Metal
detector. How can I forget that? That's all he does. The metal detector thing, and he found an old, at the front door, by the front door to the right, facing the building, he found an old lantern that was all rusted and dilapidated. It was obviously some kind of oil lantern. And he said, well, that's probably the lantern they threw in to burn the church down. Well, I don't know. That might be stretching a little bit.
Don't start a new story.
Exactly. It did line up pretty well, but I don't know if that's the case or not. But he found that, and then we found several Civil War bullets. We found quite a few nails. We found a few tools that used to actually construct the church. Some wrenches and stuff that were hand-forged wrenches, and I gave all those to the hospital. They got them in storage.
Any other questions?
What about the seating capacity?
The seating capacity.
If I remember correctly, it was about 65, I think, in the original church is what I think it was. I think it's like 109 now, and I think it was like 65. If we looked at the way the original pew was and the size it was, the way it was built, and kind of calculated. I think we came up with about 65 is what it would have said in the original church.
Anybody else?
Did the city of Germantown participate in sales and restoration?
No, they did not. They expressed some interest at first about being involved in it, but they got cold feet at the last minute, didn't want to do anything. They felt it was a private enterprise and that let the public step up. And there were several times that Jackie will tell you that we thought the project was going to just go by the wayside and not even happen. But luckily people like Jackie and Carolyn Gates and a lot of folks really persevered through that. And we, when somebody slammed the door in our face, we just kept on until we got it done, because we were not going to let this building be lost. It was just too much history here. Some people say, well, you're Catholic, why do you care about the Baptist church? I care about this church because churches were a part of the community. Churches were the cornerstone of the community. It's where you were born, it's where you got married, it's where you died. I mean, the beginning, the end, and the whole thing happened in churches back then. And, it was the base of politics, it was the base of faith, it was the base of everything with their families. If this church could tell the stories it could tell, we'd be here for years. I mean, no telling what I was going to
It was the Facebook of its time.
It is. And so why would we let the one church, even though the Presbyterian church is a little older, I love the Presbyterian church. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a travesty that has aluminum siding on it. And we weren't going to let that happen in this church. We just weren't going to let it happen. And we kicked and screamed and did what we had to do to keep everybody's attention to it. And luckily, we were in the right place at the right time when they tore that other church down. That was kind of a catalyst that it all turned within a week or two. Everybody had a different attitude about it. And I think, too, that people stepped up and put money where their mouth was. They came through, and people like the Barnetts and everybody that's on that plaque there put a lot of money in to have this done and have it done right. And so...
What was the total cost?
What was the total cost?
About $1,450,000 roughly. If you figure everything, that includes, everything, permits, architectural fees, everything. I did all the engineering, I did all the design work. I didn't charge anything for any of that. We would charge probably $80,000 to $100,000 to do that, but if it was another deal. But we did that to put in, and our company put $25,000 cash in to help out as a fundraiser. And like I said, the museum committee put $70,000 in, the Barnetts put $700,000. I mean, a lot of people really stepped up to have this thing and save it. And,
question?
Yeah, since your church is an equal opportunity place, what did the membership look like at that time? What did they do?
What did the membership look like?
I don't know. I couldn't answer that. I don't know what it was. I know that we had the New Bethel Baptist Church, and that's what this was originally. And I don't know how they did their services back then. I'm not really familiar. And do you know any of that?
Well, I think the information that we had on the historical marker that we approved indicates that the blacks and whites worshiped together, and it was like 2/3 and 1/3. It looked like. So, yeah. Pacific?
I want to commend you for preserving this building, this church. Did you consider saving the wood burning stoves?
They weren't here.
Or they weren't?
They were not here. We knew they were here at one time because of the way the floor was and the substructure below the floor. We knew they were here, but I wish I'd get anything we get those. If they were here, we would probably put them back. Although we had talked about getting some that we thought were similar to ones, and the fire department pitched a fit because if you put them in, even though you're not going to use them, they still come under the requirement. But I will say that one question was, did the city participate? The city didn't participate financially, but once we got the project off the ground, they opened their arms and worked with us pretty well getting it done. It was not an easy project. And I don't want to take all the credit for getting this done because it was not just me. There was a tremendous amount of people involved in this, and I was one little part of it. Jackie and Carolyn Gates, Jackie Cliff and Carolyn Gates were really the starters of this whole project. They got me and a lot of other people fired up about it, and once we got fired up, then we weren't going to back down.
What is it used for now?
What is it used for now?
The hospital lets people use it for weddings, church services, funerals. There's been quite a few weddings and services here. They were letting another church use it. I think their chapel was, something happened to it, and they let them come here every Sunday and use it as a worship station for them. So they're open to anybody that wants to use it. And Jackie, are they charging for this? I don't think they are. They're not charging a fee to use the church, are they, from what I remember?
They did initially charge you.
Did they? Yeah, I couldn't remember what they concluded on that.
It's a nominal.
Yeah, very nominal.
They give it to us to me.
Yeah.
They have rooms in the back that y'all did for dressing
Right.
and rehearsals and things like that. So.
What we originally proposed, I'm glad you brought that up, because what we originally proposed was doing a banquet hall behind here, a separate building for banquet hall, because we felt like that would really be a good thing for the community to have that banquet hall, the catering kitchen and all that in there, but that had a lot more money to it. The hospital just didn't want to do that, and that was fine. We got what we wanted. We saved the building. That's the main thing that we wanted in the whole process.
Joe, anybody else have a question?
You clearly understand how we all feel about the preservation of structures and buildings. So what can we do to help convince governments to come more on board, not just in kind, but financially, to preserve historic structures?
I think the answer to that, and I said this all along, and I remember when I said this one time, that everybody looked at me like I had lobsters crawling out of my ears and said, "What are you talking about?" Being a former government official or a person, most elected officials are very conscious of their money that they spend, which is great. That's what they need to be. But they get so focused on money sometimes they forget about the big picture of why we're here. And government should be to provide the safe, health, and welfare of the community. Well, the welfare of the community is the history of the community. And we told stories about the church is how we saw it. We had meetings with all the people at the hospital, all the people of the city. We told the stories about the churches and the weddings and the funerals that were here, and how much history we had here, and how we didn't want to lose that. We were very passionate about our story. And I think that's what sold it, I really do. Because, as elected officials, we have to balance that money, but that's no different than putting money in a soccer field or a ball field. It's no different. The return's the same. It's part of the community, it's part of the health and welfare of our community. So we've got to sell that, and we also got to be able to go to these cities and be professional about it. Not go in there and whine and cry about what they're going to tear the building down, and we just don't want you to do it, but we don't have a solution to it. Give them a solution. Hey, we'll raise part of the money if y'all put part of the money up. Hey, we'll do this if y'all do that. It's a give and take, and that's what you've got to do with government. You've got to let them know that you're invested in the project, that you're passionate about the project, and that you're willing to lay down in front of that truck that's going to tear that building down if they don't do something about it. I mean, that's what it boils down to. It's all about passion. It's all about the passion of what you want to do, and you've got to present that in an orderly way, not in a venomous way or a confrontational way. You've got to have solutions. You've got to have reasons why you want to do this, and you've got to prove to them, those naysayers that say, "Why do we want to do that?" You've got to tell them why they want to do it and how it's going to benefit the community. You've got to spell that out. So many times as citizens, we cower down and we walk away and, "Oh, well, they're going to put that road in, or they're going to do this, and they're just going to do it because they're the government." That's not true. The government is people that are like you and me and everybody else that are elected. And they've got a soul, they've got a conscience, they're going to do the right thing. But you've got to be able to sell it to them. You've got to make them understand that is critical. That's the answer. That's the best answer I can give you.
And is there a commitment from the hospital to never tear this down, or to?
No, obviously they're not going to commit to that, but now that they got all this money in, these people have put money up, and now that it's a very popular thing, they wouldn't dare tear it down now.
It's kind of iconic, like the depot.
Yeah.
It's Germantown.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think that's a good question to end on, too. So I want to tell you something about this guy, too, I missed on this. His last year, you thought you could just slide out as mayor. And in '94, we had two of the worst things that ever happened in the city. And the first one was in February. It was an ice storm. It was terrible. If that wasn't bad enough, in November, Thanksgiving weekend, we had a tornado to a loss of life. So Charles didn't just roll out real easy, did you?
No, it was 94 was a tough year, but you know, get back to what Jimmy was saying. It's about having a great community, about having that communications, and even you know, I think that things like that bring out the best in us sometimes. I think when things are easy, we kind of get lax. We say, who cares? You know, it's going good. Why not? And then when tragedy hits, things happen. You step up to the plate. You do what you got to do. And I was more proud of the committee for doing that than anything I ever saw, because those two things were, you know, say ice from this deal. Well, we didn't have power every 24 days, some of us. I was the last person to get the power on, because I was tired of people calling and saying, I bet you got your power on, Mayor. I said, no, I don't. And I told all your supporters, stay off my street till you get everything else on, because I don't care. But
your neighbors loved you.
They did. My neighbors hated me for quite a while. But we got through it, and we got through it by circling the wagons and people stepping up and doing what we had to do. The same thing with the tornado. We had lots of life. That was far more tragic, and committee was devastated. That was a really bad situation, but the community circled the wagons like any good family does. That's what the city did. They circled the wagons, and we persevered and got through it. And it was always an honor. But you know, all those things that happen in politics. I just retired in January, and we own two companies. We own the door and hardware company, and on the construction company. Well, my sons have those. My grandsons are working now, so we're a family operation. 4th, 5th generation contractors now, and I'm so proud of that. I'm really proud of that, but what I'm most proud of in my whole career is getting to renovate this building, because I got to finally put back a building that we tore so many down, to take the place of the hundreds that we tore down. So this was a great, great project, and it's something to be here forever, hopefully. And we've got sprinkler systems in it. It's not going to burn, Joe. It's safe, and it's efficient, so we're proud to be a small part of it. And you know, y'all obviously all are part of the historical community, and I commend y'all for being here today to hear us talk about this. Hopefully something was said will inspire y'all to do what you got to do. And hey, I'm retired now, so I've got plenty of time. If you need help on anything, call me. I'll be glad to go and pot the fire or somebody if we need to. I love these type of projects. I think they're great. And although I won't do any more construction-wise, I'll be glad to help and lead the charge if you need some help on something like that to be done. Be honored to help. And it was an honor to be here today with y'all, to be around people that care about the history of our community, and to care enough to take the time out of a busy day to be here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.